Senator Schwertner, you're recognized to suspend on the regular order of business on House Bill 1927.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to suspend the regular order of business on House Bill 1927. Members,
I'm just waiting for the votes to be registered. There being 18 ayes, 13 no votes, the rules are suspended. The chair now lays out on third reading and final passage House Bill for 1927. The secretary will read the caption.
House Bill 1927 relating to provisions governing the carrying of a firearm by a person who is 21 years of age or older and not otherwise prohibited by state or federal law.
Senator Menéndez, you're recognized to speak on the bill.
Thank you, Mr. President and members. You know, we've said it many times, and it's very true. And the President said it just recently, I think, in your speech to the national champions. You talked about how few senators have served in the state of Texas. So it is truly a privilege and an honor to serve in this body. Our constituents continue to vote for us to represent them, and we have a privilege to make these difficult decisions. Moreover, we have a responsibility to ensure that their voices are heard. Senator, this is a note that one of the people that was testifying before you, Ms. Gabriela Diaz with Moms Demand Action, she wasn't able to finish her note, to read her testimony, to finish it in full during the committee hearing because of the 2 minutes. And so I promised her that I would finish the part that she didn't get to read. She was quoting D.C. versus Heller, quote, "Like most rights, the Second Amendment right is not unlimited. It's not a right to keep and carry any weapon whatsoever in any manner whatsoever and for whatever purpose. For example, concealed weapon prohibitions have been upheld upheld under the amendment or state analogous. The court's opinion should not be taken to cast doubt on long-standing prohibitions on the possessions of firearms by felons and the mentally ill," just had an amendment for that, "or laws forbidding the carrying of firearms in sensitive places such as schools and government buildings." That was signed by Justices Antonin Scalia, Chief Justice John Roberts, Justice Kennedy, Clarence Thomas, and Samuel Alito. I want to thank Gabriela for taking the time to write this and to come and testify along with the other moms. Senator, in removing the license to carry, we're also going to be removing the background checks, the training requirement, the training class, the written exam, the shooting test, fingerprints, and checks on an individual's psychiatric condition or chemical dependency status. In exchange for what? All of this is extremely concerning. Mr. President and members, before we cast our votes today, I want you to ask yourselves, will passing this vote, will this protect our constituents? Will this make Texas safer? I think we can disagree on a number of items, and respectfully so. However, members, this is something so fundamental that we should not disagree on. Of course, we have a Second Amendment right. Members, I have been a gun owner my whole life. I understand. But the rights, such as the right of a woman to choose, or the right to a family, the right to marry, all continue to be chipped away at in this very building, on this very floor. And my concern here is that we continue to pick and choose which right is a fundamental right or an inalienable right. So when the Second Amendment right infringes on my family's right to pursue happiness, it's no longer acceptable. Many of you don't know this, but I have had a gun held to the back of my head. And I hope you never have to experience that. When I was a young man in a meeting working to provide for my family, there were some armed robbers who came in, and the door burst open and they had their guns. If we had had a gun, we would not have had time to pull it, or there would have been a shootout and somebody would have been dead. So, unless you've been in this situation, which I pray to God none of you are, I think it's hard to completely understand the trauma of gun violence. Members, this bill is not, in my opinion, a form of justice or liberty. Actually, it practically gives anyone an ability to carry, which in my opinion makes it irresponsible and creating a path for more gun violence. This is one of the reasons why the sheriff from Bexar County, Sheriff Javier Salazar, is against the bill. And I quote, because, I quote, "more guns on the streets in the hands of untrained, unidentified, and unlicensed people is not the answer to anything." I believe this is a bad precedent to follow, and if we're looking to other states, perhaps we should join them in their move towards expanding Medicaid, covering them for insurance, or the use of medical cannabis, or like so many other states that prohibit discrimination based on this sexual orientation or gender identity. Moreover, it's been mentioned that this bill is going to help women defend themselves from their abusers. However, the ability for more men to carry a gun is actually more dangerous for women in abusive relationships. A woman living with a gun in the home is 3 times more likely to be murdered than one with no gun in that same home. Lastly, if it's too expensive to have a license to carry, if $40 is too much, then maybe we should just give them free licenses to drive. It's just too easy. It's so much easier for us and our staff to be safe in this building. We know that people come through metal detectors. We know that they get interviewed by DPS. We know that they show their license to carry. We can also lock our doors. Are all of our constituents afforded those same protections? I don't believe they do. This body has been called by many the most deliberative political body in this state. And it's in some ways because we all represent nearly 1 million people. Those million constituents that we have don't all believe the same way. As a matter of fact, I believe that overwhelmingly, they don't want to see us pass this bill. Members, I will stand today with my constituents, with the students who have come to talk to us about this bill, with the moms who want to protect their children, and with all of those who have lost a loved one to gun violence. Hearing this debate on this floor can be traumatic for people who have been victims of gun violence. And I hope to God that what we do today does not result in a mistake that will have horrible consequences. And for that, Mr. President and members, I urge you to oppose this bill, which I believe will cause more harm than good. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator
Thank you,
Menéndez.
members.
Senator Eckhardt to speak on the bill.
Thank you, sir. I rise in opposition to the bill. I used to prosecute domestic violence cases way back in the day. The suffering I saw and my often failed attempts to alleviate it and prevent it in the future haunt me to this day. House Bill 1927 will make it easier for criminal, violent, distraught, or mentally unstable abusers, like the ones I used to prosecute, to carry weapons with them nearly everywhere they go. One of the last cases I prosecuted is not unlike the hypothetical I discussed with Senator Schwertner. I'll just call them Bob and Mary. Bob and Mary, their marriage was falling apart, and they fought. Mary defended herself by cracking a vase over Bob's face. When the police arrived, Mary had no visible injury, but Bob did. Nevertheless, Bob admitted at the scene that they had fought and he had assaulted Mary. So Bob was arrested. During the course of the investigation, it came to light that Bob had no previous criminal history. And Mary said that she wanted to pursue a divorce and that she would be asking the family court for a protective order. Bob very much wanted to continue to be able to have visitation rights with their child. He had admitted at the scene to assaulting Mary, and so he admitted in writing to the assault, and he agreed to a deferred adjudication. 6 months later, in what Mary thought was an exchange of their child, Bob came to her place of work, to the parking garage, and attempted to kill her by shooting her. She escaped. But Bob got back in the car and shot and killed their child and then killed himself. I gave Bob a deferred adjudication. Our actions as representatives of the state, whether we're a prosecutor or we're a police officer or we are a senator, have consequences for Bob and for Mary and for their child. And for that reason, I would ask you to vote against this bill, because adding a gun-carrying loophole to the gun-purchasing loophole makes it even more difficult for law enforcement to know the good guys from the bad guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Blanco.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise to respectfully speak against House Bill 1927. Members, on August 3rd, we've talked about this. 23 people were gunned down at a Walmart in El Paso. They were the target of a white supremacist who grabbed a gun, drove across the state to my city. And you all have heard me speak on this floor of that day's confusion,
We need a doctor, DPS. We need emergency. Tom? Members, would you step away for DPS, please, unless you're a doctor? Leave the doctors and DPS there. Members, we're just going to stand at ease for a few minutes. Members, we will continue. Senator Blanco, you were speaking.
Thank you, Mr. President. We wish our colleague a speedy recovery. Members, on August 3rd, 23 people were gunned down in my community in El Paso, and we've heard the stories of the tragic event from this floor. I spoke of the sadness, the confusion, the fear following the shooting, and we consoled one another. We were consoled by people across the state. Then weeks later, another mass shooting happened in Odessa. And in the aftermath of the shooting, Governor Abbott created the Texas Safety Commission. And the Senate and the House formed select committees to study gun violence and propose solutions to the public health crisis that we face. The recommendations made were designed to keep our communities safe. And those were my amendments today. Now, Senator Perry just offered a prayer just now, and it hit home. And as leaders, it's our responsibility to keep our people safe. And members, both the House and the Senate had hearings on the shootings. Many of us in this body went to Odessa, you went to El Paso to hear the devastating stories from those innocent victims that were impacted by those shootings. And we listened for hours. We listened 6 hours in Odessa. We listened for 6 hours in El Paso. We heard from Carla Byrne, whose brother Joe was murdered in front of his wife, in front of his kids, as they sat in a vehicle at a red light at an intersection. His life was taken just days after celebrating his father's birthday. It'd be the last time that his family had spent time together, laughing and enjoying their time together. We heard about the 37-year-old Ted McCloskey, who could make anything with his hands, very talented. How a longtime friend of his had invited him over to a Halloween party. He went and had a good time until the shooting started. And when things took a violent turn, we heard the story about how Ted used a paper towel holder to fight the shooter and save the lives of the people in the house, and Ted was shot and killed. One of our black leaders in El Paso, Pastor Michael Grady, we heard of the story of him learning of the shooting at Walmart and him driving to see if he could get a hold of his daughter, and he found his daughter in the parking lot, riddled with holes from bullets because of this shooter. We heard of the woman who pleaded with us for reforms in Odessa. In her words, if we can prevent even one more child from being murdered, if we can prevent one more father from not being murdered in front of his children, if we can prevent one more mother and father from burying their child, if we can prevent one more daughter from rolling up to her brother's grave, to see her mother on her hands and knees digging in the mud so that her dead son might have flowers for the grave. Isn't this worth all of our efforts? Now, this is the first session since the shootings at Walmart, since the shootings in Odessa, and we heard from our constituents that they want solutions. Just this year, there have been mass shootings in Palestine, in Houston, in Fort Worth, in Bryan, in Beaumont, in Allen, in San Antonio, in Dallas, in Austin, in Livingston, in Amarillo. Members, we need solutions. And this is what we come up with. Members, I'm opposed to this bill because it doesn't make us safer. Relaxing safety is not a solution. Members, we've got to advance reforms to protect our communities. Because if we don't, we can expect more. More violence, more senseless murder, more mass shootings. How many more lives? How many more lives have to be robbed? Of an individual seeing their daughter walk down the aisle, or seeing their son graduate from college, celebrating somebody's birthday. And this feels personal to me because I attended 23 funerals. And all I could do is offer a flag that was flown over the Capitol. And they send us here to fix these things. And all I can do is offer a flag and a condolence. We're better than this, members. So, my message to you is that we can do this. We deserve better solutions. And I just feel that permitless carry won't make our communities safer. So, members, I respectfully will be voting no on House Bill 1927. And I want to thank you for giving me some time to say a few words. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Gutierrez, speak on the bill.
Thank you, Mr. President. Reality always has a way of setting in this place, in this building. And we all hope our friend is okay. And for those out there watching, our friend had an accident this weekend, and he's going to be all right, and I know that. But reality always has a strange way of setting into this building. And there's not one damn word I want to tell any of you that's going to convince you to vote against this bill. So thanks for listening, I suppose. And I'm sorry for what you have to do. I know some of you are very impassioned about this bill. And I know that at least 5 of you weren't so keen on it. I know that. But, 830,000 gun owners in this state, less than 3.5% of the population of Texas. And they're pretty loud, those 830,000. Boy, I got a lot of calls this week and last week and the week before. Imagine y'all got them too. But I'll tell you, if that isn't the tail wagging the dog, then I don't know what is. 3.5% of the population of Texas own guns. That's it. That's it. Maybe 40, 50,000 folks were calling us all week long for the last 2 weeks. But here we are, voting on a bill that is of according to you, Chairman Schwertner, may not change a lot of things. I think it will. I think there's a lot of personal responsibility that we haven't seen in the past. And I think that you're expecting to see a whole heck of a lot of personal responsibility or lack thereof in the future. I was going to tell you a bunch of quotes about the Senate and what we're supposed to be in the Senate. I learned some time ago not to make personal attacks on people. I'm not going to do that. But I will suggest to you that James Madison said that the Senate was supposed to be the anchor. It was supposed to be the necessary fence. I got to read this part. Against the fickleness and passion that tended to influence the attitudes of the general public and members of the House of Representatives. You didn't know, Senator Blanco, that we were part of the fickle public last session. But we'd get impassioned over there. Boy, we'd fight, literally sometimes fight. And we had to break you up from one because it was impassioned. We've all done it. For some of us that have been in the House, we get it. But over here, we're supposed to think things through a little bit more. We're supposed to say, hey, that's 3.5% of the population of Texas that wants us to do something. And that's just 3.5%. Law enforcement is saying, hell no. Our local police are saying, hell no. The sheriff's saying, hell no. I get it. My rural folks want it. I'm still a no. Some folks in rural, and hey, listen, when you're out in Brewster County and you got some rattlesnake out there, you want that sidearm so you can shoot them down. I get all that. But at the end of the day, we are passing a bill for 3.5% of the population of Texas. I'm not going to bother you or bore you with all of those other quotes on what the Senate is supposed to be. But I want to tell you a story, and I want to tell you some statistics, and I'll try to be quick about it, Mr. President. There's a local elected official in Bexar County in San Antonio, in my city. She allows me to tell her story as a way of respect to her. I never use her name. She had a little boy, and we knew that little boy. His brightest, sharpest kid you could imagine, nice kid, a friend of a friend, but we knew him through all the social media stuff, His parents were divorced. An elected official and her ex-husband were divorced. That little boy was happy as can be. And Dad, unfortunately, had a gun at the house. Little boy was playing with a gun. A little 13-year-old boy took his own life. And he's no longer with us. He's gone. And so, if you think, Senator Schwertner, that there's personal responsibility in Texas, I assure you, you're wrong. Just in the last year. In the last year, in Fort Worth, we've had, just this last week in April, a child died in Fort Worth. 2 weeks ago, in Dallas, one child. In Houston, in April, one child. In Pasadena, a child died from a gun-related incident. El Paso, in February. Mission, in February. Arlington, in New Braunfels, in Forney, in Texarkana. In the last year, and you can come by and see these stats, we've had close to 30 children die. Children at the hands of a gun. That doesn't account for teenagers. personal responsibility? I don't think so. The teenage list goes on for 4 pages just in the last year. There's 15 pages of this. I promise you this. Here's what's going to happen. More criminals are going to walk around with guns openly. I promise you. Law enforcement won't be able to ask them one damn thing because of this bill. More vigilantes are going to rise up. You're going to see some Ahmaud Arbery's like you did in Georgia. That's going to happen, I promise you. More people will be shot accidentally. It's over 100 teenagers in the last year. And more children are going to die because of this bill. Law enforcement doesn't want your help with this legislation. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Lucio on the bill.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, I have been silent all day, and there's a reason for that. Senator Blanco, I was in the committee hearing that took place, and I thought, quite frankly, I had said enough on how I felt about the gun, Senator Coher's gun bill. But I felt I needed to share a few thoughts with you all. And I want you new ones that are here now to understand where I've been over the last 35 plus years in the legislature. I have had the privilege to serve with men and women from every corner of this state. Many of them came in and left, but I got to know people. I got to know how they felt about issues, and quite frankly, along the way, Senator Cohers, we have passed so many bills on this floor who have really helped create a great quality of life in this great state. We really have. Cancer research in the hundreds of millions, right? Healthcare legislation, education, everything you can think of, Senator Miles, we have addressed over the last, 35 years. And for me to get up and quite frankly not acknowledge the fact that there are men and women in this state sitting in these 31 chairs today, 30 other chairs than mine, and be critical of a position they take which they believe in their hearts is correct would not be right, because that's not who I am. I think we need to, and right now I've been praying the moment that our brother hit that ground, that floor. And I want you to pray with me for him, because he means a lot to his family, to his district, and to people that have met him from other parts of the state who he has been a gentleman with and helped. I know it is so hard, Senator Blanco. I can imagine. I've gone to hundreds of funerals. Can you imagine? Over the years, people they ask me, "Are you going because of pot?" Heck no. I will not go to a funeral unless I know the family, quite frankly. or it's a situation that somebody lost their lives. And as a member of the community that represents that community, we have to pay our respects. I have in my office a stack of letters from children from San Antonio, Wimberley, San Marcos, Austin, and in between. Some I haven't had a chance to open them, but they're scared. And for us to make statements here, with all due respect to an outstanding legislator, Senator Gutierrez, and tell the public that children are going to die and scare those children is not the thing we want to do. We want to let them know that we're going to continue to work together. We're going to continue to try to find answers and solutions to the issues that they're concerned with. All these children thank me for protecting their lives. I never thought what hit me, and I was, like I said, I wasn't going to get up today. I was just going to vote my conscience. But I have a great deal of respect with Dr. Schwertner. I do. I think he's one of the best legislators I've ever served with in 35 years. He's a man of integrity. I respect him. I respect everyone here, whether you're a Democrat or Republican, because these issues aren't partisan. And we're one Texas family in this Senate. I pray, and I'll continue to pray, that nobody dies, that families indeed, might be more secure. But it is that personal responsibility that some of you have been talking about that has to set in our lives. It has to happen. We're blessed with leadership in this Senate. Thank you, Senator Patrick, for always being fair and honest with everyone. A lot of great resolutions have passed here this session. A lot of great things have happened. And I don't want to see that go by the wayside because of this issue. Senator Eckhardt touched my heart because she shared with us a personal tragedy. It takes a lot of intestinal fortitude to be able to stand here and take responsibility on somebody dying because she made a decision. We all make decisions every day. That's God's greatest gift to us. Our greatest gift is the power to choose. That is the greatest gift we have. And I choose to love each and every one of you. No matter whether you support me or not. Because that's my responsibility in behalf of my Maker to you. I always try to do my best to help in any way I can and to offer help to you whenever I can. And I just got off the phone with a reporter in Washington, wanted to talk about a bill that I'm carrying that would save lives. And we all have done our best. So don't let this bill or any issue divide us. Because at the end of the day, those that are listening and viewing what is happening here, at the end of the day, we embrace each other. But make that embrace real. Because when it's real, then we can come back and God will bless us. And we will continue to help other people, Senator Powell, that are dependent on us to work together and come together. We will have our own position on this bill today. but I am not going to be judgmental. I will be judged, and each one of you will be judged by the proper dieting at the end of the day. And I just wanted to say that my vote was in response also to all those children who wrote me. And I want them to know, though, before I sit down, that every one of my colleagues here, children, students, love you. Because each one of the men and women on this floor have voted on issues that have created a better quality of life for you, so you and your families can live a better life in our great state. And we pray that we can see death stop. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Lucio. Senator Zaffirini, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President and members, and thank you, Senator Schwertner, for what has been a long, occasionally heated, but ultimately civil debate about House Bill 1927. Much of the discussion surrounding this bill, not necessarily by senators, but certainly by advocates, has been couched in constitutional terms. The Constitution protects our right to keep and bear arms with, as others have established, the same sorts of reasonable limits as are placed on other constitutional rights. Like all of us, I strongly support the Second Amendment, and I kept an open mind as we took a broad view of the regulation of firearms at hearings of the Senate Select Committee on Mass Violence Prevention and Community Safety. How, after all, could a reasonable person's opinion remain rigid in light of what occurred in my district at the First Baptist Church in Sutherland Springs? I do not believe, however, that this bill is about rights or about public safety. Ultimately, I believe it is more about convenience. House Bill 1927 would merely make it easier to carry a firearm legally in public, including by persons who should not. It is not difficult to obtain a license to carry in Texas, and this legislature in recent sessions has enacted measures to make it easier to get one. The obstacles, such as they are minor but extremely important. A small fee, a background check, a safety course, and a demonstration of shooting proficiency. These would be rendered irrelevant by House Bill 1927. We pass laws all the time to enhance convenience for our constituents, but rarely do they have the negative consequences this bill could have. Permitless carry could complicate the work of law enforcement officials and make their jobs even more perilous. It could place victims of domestic violence at even greater risk of death at the hands of their abusers. It could place all of us at risk by allowing the public carriage of lethal weapons by persons who would not need to demonstrate the ability to possess or to use them safely. In 2020, the Texas Department of Public Safety denied 2,269 licenses to carry applications, including 926 because of past felony convictions, 136 because of family violence convictions, and 56 because of pending felony charges. Those efforts are admirable, but would be undercut by this legislation. The licensing process allows us to ask critical questions before allowing the public carriage of a lethal weapon based on what can only be described as the mildest inconvenience. Even with the penalty enhancements and other amendments, removing these requirements would inhibit us from stopping preventable tragedies. Having been at UT during the violent rampage by the sniper from the tower, I wonder how law enforcement officers will be able to differentiate the good actors from the bad. It was difficult that day on that campus. I remember it vividly. For these reasons and more, Mr. President, members, I will respectfully vote no on House Bill 1927. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Zaffirini. Senator Hinojosa.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I'll try not to be repetitive because we had a long day and a lot of questions, a lot of answers, and I think so far very on-point comments. But I'm out of focus, because I know we talked earlier about what this bill does in terms of, quite frankly, bypassing the requirements we have for a license to carry a handgun, and who's really among the public, those who are really facing real danger are our police forces. Yeah. In the last couple of years, we had quite a few DPS officers killed in the line of duty. We had police officers from our cities and some sheriff's departments killed in the line of duty. And by passing this bill, we're really taking away a filter by which we try to find those who are not eligible for the reasons listed under the statute for a license to carry. They're not eligible to carry a gun in public because they're a danger to the public. And Senator Huffman, I know we can have debates and argue in court about what is reasonable suspicion, but here's what happens to the police that are out on the streets, dealing with people at midnight who may be carrying a weapon, a gun, on their holster. So how are they supposed to know whether or not that person really has a criminal record or not? How will they know whether that person is really a danger to them? Do they go up and ask, are you a felon? Are you a drug addict? Well, this is a real challenge to our police officers who are out on the streets. And this bill makes their lives and puts them at a higher risk. Their job is already difficult enough in trying to enforce the laws. And again, I repeat, look at how many officers we have lost in the line of duty trying to protect our families, protect our communities, who give up their lives to keep us safe. And yet here we are, passing legislation taking away a lot of those safeguards that we have under the license to carry a weapon. Now we're allowing anybody, and we talked about some of the loopholes, people that can get a gun, person to person, gun shows, straw purchases. There are many ways that people can get a gun, but now with this bill, House Bill 1927, we allow them to go ahead and carry a gun without any type of criminal background check. It's a real danger, and we're taking away that filter, and the main beneficiaries of doing away with a license to carry are those who are disqualified, have no business carrying a gun. And thank you, Senator Schwertner, for your patience in explaining a lot of your amendments in your bill, but I will respectfully vote no on House Bill 1927. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, sir. Senator Whitmire on the bill.
Thank you. Mr. President, members, I rise to speak against House Bill 1922. And I'm reminded of, I think I've traced it to Mark Twain, who said, no one's life, liberty, or property is safe while the legislature's in session. Quite frankly, I think he had today on his mind. Last week, it would have been your liberty because we were trying to control how families raise their children. But today, I think our lives are being dealt with. Once again, as I stand before you on a subject of this magnitude, I'm a little amazed how far apart we can be, how people can disagree on something that is this serious and, in my mind, that clear. But then I realize we're not that far apart, because I know some of the folks that are going to vote for this, not everyone, but we are friends and we do visit. I do know that some of the supporters have reservations, and I understand how the system works. I would like to comment on a couple of things that have come up today. First of all, our Bill of Rights. We're all supporting the Second Amendment, absolutely all 31 in our leadership. But it doesn't guarantee you, Senator Schwertner, the right to carry a gun down the street. It has limitations. You can't have a silencer. You got to get a federal permit to have a machine gun. I could go right through a list
of restrictions, and most of the amendments in the Bill of Rights do have, such as freedom of speech. We all know you can't shout fire in a theater, so to have a debate about our constitutional rights, that's a good message, but I don't think any of us are restoring our constitutional rights today. And you've mentioned several times that you're just restoring our rights, and I go back and trace our Texas history. I don't know how far you want to go back, but we've had restrictions. In fact, I think someone was even saying there's been some pretty effective sheriffs in this state at one time or another said, don't bring your guns to town. But I don't think, quite frankly, this is a debate about our constitutional rights. Other states, let me tell you what other states are going to do with this law. They're going to use it against us to recruit businesses. And if you don't think Dow Chemical and the others that are located in Delaware are going to use this to recruit top-notch engineers and very bright of the brightest. I used to do some recruiting for a major law firm. You'd be shocked what the kids graduating from college that can go anywhere. They ask you about equality because they have GLBT friends. They'll ask you about quality of life, whether it's traffic or now flood control in the greater Houston area. They'll actually, if they can go anywhere, they'd like to go where there's a good sports team. Well, I think you can add guns to that list. I think when major firms are doing recruiting, it's going to be mentioned that in Texas, because you see, Senator Schwertner, they don't believe like some of the proponents. They're afraid of guns. Literally afraid because they read, in Houston, we have 2 or 3 murders most nights, which added together are a mass murder. And Senator Blanco, you were so impressive and so personal in your message. And we had an interim study last year, members. We traveled the state. We went to El Paso, went to Midland, Odessa. What did we learn from that testimony? I haven't seen a proposal. Many people wanted the red flag proposal, which we are not addressing. So I think the other states, Senator, to mention Delaware or Mississippi, please, how low do you want to go? In all due respect. Well, I don't think Texas looks to any other state. Most of the states on your list are very small population, certainly in the West. And now let me mention who's actually proposing this. Not the members, but I understand the base. At one time, the NRA was part of my base. I voted for the concealed weapon law in 1995. Jerry Patterson made such an argument that it should be concealed because then the bad guys would wonder which one of us had the gun. We debated open carry, constitutional carry. It was decided by this body in the legislature to keep them concealed, to keep the bad guys wondering who actually had it. But you can't please some of the proponents. They actually worked in some of my campaigns supporting me. They probably regret it now, but that's okay. You can't please them, and I don't know what will be the next step unless we start issuing guns. I was telling someone maybe there'll be an item in the budget where we fund guns for folks who can't afford them. I mean, that's how ridiculous this is getting. It's completely out of control. I understand the pressure from some members' base. I have a base, and you can't always vote 100% with your base. And if you're a good member, they understand that. Now, you can't do it on a regular basis, but there are, in good conscience, times that you'll vote against your base. The police. You know, it's amazing. Just 4 years ago, the police chiefs had a press conference and killed this issue. To my friends in law enforcement, I know you're not monolithic. I know we have small town sheriffs, we have big town sheriffs, but I am disappointed, and I will say publicly that there was not the energy opposing this by law enforcement that you have witnessed in the past or how you would expect. I do believe, members, that we haven't heard the last of this issue. I think it's going to be a national story. So if we're ready, those that are proposing this, for Texas to make headlines that now anyone can get up, take a gun to town, no questions asked, I just really don't think that's the message we want for a state that is going in the right direction in so many ways. So I close by saying, I do believe this bill will be repealed. I can't tell you how soon. It could be next session, but I don't think it'll be too far in the distant future. The word will go out, and this is a very defining vote. The sides have been very clear, and I think Senator Creighton certainly gets so much credit for having the strength and courage to come here after his circumstances. But I think every one of us has represented our district. It's been a respectful debate. We can strongly disagree. Senator Schwertner, you started out today, I had written down, I was going to ask you, do you really feel comfortable doing what you're doing? Because in the early discussions, it's a difficult subject for people that feel strongly opposed to it, for you to stand there and have to engage us. But you've certainly represented yourself, your district, and this Senate in a tough situation very well. So I will close by saying, we certainly spent a valuable day on something that I personally don't think that the majority of Texans would recommend that we do. But elections matter. Many of you and the leadership campaigned on this issue, and I respect that. But the last thing I'll say is, each one of us have residents and voters and constituents that are afraid of the next mass shooting. I know my daughter's friends that have second and third graders, literally after a mass shooting, whether it be Santa Fe or one of the other locations, worry about taking their kids to school. And that's not the Texas we want to live in. And I think more guns only will perpetuate that fear. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Whitmire. Senator Campbell, speak on the bill.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just to speak on the bill. I believe the most important reason, not the only reason, but the most important reason a law-abiding citizen owns a personal firearm is for self-defense protection. And they have a constitutional right to do so. We have a constitutional right to do so. This bill does nothing radical but protect our right to protect ourselves. It protects the rights of law-abiding citizens to defend ourselves and our families from those who would violate the law to do us harm. That is not radical. That's practical. When we know that when your life and safety is at risk, seconds count. You don't have 5, 10 minutes, or maybe longer to wait for a violent attack to be resolved. This is about safety, personal safety. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, members. Thank you, Senator Schwertner, for bringing this bill forward.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Hall on the bill.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, Senator Schwertner, this has been a long day, over 8 hours, but it's been an even longer journey to get back to what was originally given to Texas in 6 of our constitutions, basically saying the same thing of our rights to self-defense. But this step, and each one of the steps along the way, you could hear exactly the same thing that's said here today. Every time we've increased the rights of people to defend themselves, we've been told it's going to end up with blood in the streets, running wild, gunfights everywhere. Yet that has never happened, not one time. All the way up through last session, when Senator Creighton's bill, SB 506, which basically is basically constitutional carry during a disaster, passed. The same thing. Now, we all have different opinions, different views, different principles, different values. We come here and work together as a very deliberative body to blend those together, all with the same objective: to make Texas better, to serve our constituents. I feel today that we have fulfilled the not so often remembered phrase in our Constitution that simply says, with a view to prevent crime. And I think we've done that here today. I think we've made Texas safer by allowing law-abiding citizens to be able to defend themselves and their families. And we've also made the streets safer for our law enforcement by increasing penalties, which has been proven time and time again to actually reduce crime. This is a very deliberative body. We each have our principles, our values, our goals, our beliefs, and we each fight for what we believe is right. None of us always wins, and none of us always lose. But what we do respectfully for Texas. Now, the Senate has its way of doing business. The House has its way of doing business. We've seen this with similar bills. But I know that going forward, that the Senate stands ready to work with the House to get this bill to the governor's desk. And I look forward to working with you to make that happen, Senator Schwertner.
Senator Schwertner, to close.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, members. It has been a long day, very respectful day, one filled with a lot of contemplation regarding this issue, important issue, one that goes back since the founding, obviously, of Texas and our country. To the point of Senator Gutierrez, actually 45.7% of Texas households have guns in their home, 45.7%, and there are 1.6 million licensed to carry individuals in the state of Texas. It's a big issue for the people of Texas. I want to thank the 63 sheriffs that, after hearing some of the discussion on the floor regarding support by law enforcement, have gotten together and texted me to publicly voice their support of this legislation. Texans want to feel safe. I think that's something we can all agree upon. Texans should not be victims, Senator Blanco. How do we get there? What can we do to improve safety? And there is a chasm regarding this issue, but other issues too. I think Texans are tired of criminals not being prosecuted in our major cities. I think Texans want to see support and respect of law enforcement encouraged. This bill is, to me, a simple bill, a right already afforded to individuals with long guns. In fact, with long guns, you can purchase and carry in public places at the age of 18, Senator, not 21. To me, this bill is about two things: the advancement of self-defense and a belief in and trust of law-abiding citizens to avail themselves of their Second Amendment right to self-defend by carrying a sidearm that's holstered on their body in public spaces. It's not radical. We've seen advancement of gun laws in Texas and across this nation. I would have never authored this bill if I thought it would in any way put Texans in harm or diminish law enforcement's ability to enforce the law. I think this is an advancement that's going to improve safety both for the individual and society at large. With those words, Mr. President, I move final passage of HB 1927.
Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Buckingham, Campbell, Creighton, Eckhardt, Gutierrez, Hall, Hancock, Hinojosa, Huffman, Hughes, Johnson, Colcourse, Lucio, Menéndez, Miles, Nelson, Nichols, Paxton, Perry, Powell, Schwertner, Seliger, Springer, Taylor, West, Whitmire, and Zaffirini.
There being 18 ayes and 13 no votes, the bill finally passes. Thank you, Senator.